Hi students, I just wanted to let you know that we are beginning a new unit, Unit 10, The Rise of Europe. It's one of the more interesting units that we're going to study. We're going to take a look at the Renaissance for the rest of May. We will not get to the Reformation or the Age of Exploration, although that's one of my favorites. But we are going to take a look at the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I can't say that very fast. But remember Leonardo, Michelangelo, yeah, all the turtles. Well, they actually were named from real people that actually lived a long time ago. So we are going to begin with the Renaissance in chapter 24. I am going to skip the My Story, although I'll put a link to the My Story in the next link after the section. Please read it because it is about Leonardo da Vinci, someone who's very interesting. We also, if you take a look at here, remember the Renaissance begins the modern era. The modern era begins with the birth of the Renaissance. So, without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and start section 1. I will not read section 1, I'll let the book do that. And it begins on page 712, The Origins of the Renaissance, to see where it actually began. You have your key ideas there. There's just 2 of them. And you've got 3 key terms, mercantile, Renaissance, and patron. And so we're going to begin the reading.
The origins of the Renaissance. During the Middle Ages, life for most Europeans revolved around the manor and the church. By the 1300s, however, new forces were at work that would bring considerable changes to Europe. The breakdown of the feudal order. As trade and industry grew, feudalism and manorialism weakened. A wealthy merchant in Scotland could now drink French wine, buy clothing made of Asian silk, and flavor his food with spices from Africa or India. In one Italian textile factory, there were 30,000 workers. Urban growth. The labor force for this economic expansion came from migrants who moved from manors to towns. Peasants were drawn to towns by the promise of wages. Nobles were also attracted to towns for economic reasons. They saw opportunities to make money by buying property and holding public office. In Italian cities, the rural nobility married into the mercantile middle class to form a new urban aristocracy. Mercantile means related to commerce or trade. This urban upper class kept its ties to the land, but lived mainly in town. Instead of spending money on rural castles, the new nobility used its wealth to build beautiful homes in the city. Secular learning. For centuries, learning had been based in the church. Even after universities sprang up in European cities, theology remained the most important course of study. In time, interest grew in secular subjects such as law, medicine, philosophy, engineering, and science. Cultural rebirth. Around 1300, these different trends came together to begin the Renaissance. The Renaissance was a great cultural revival that swept through Europe from the 1300s through the 1500s. Renaissance is French for rebirth. Renaissance thinkers rediscovered the literature, art, and learning of ancient Greece and Rome. They looked to these classical cultures for models of how to live. Reading check. What happened to feudalism in the 1300s? Birthplace of the Renaissance. In England, France, and Spain, the feudal order defined the structure of life. In Italy, however, feudalism had never developed in the same way. This may help explain why Italy was the birthplace of the Renaissance. Italian city-states. By the 1300s, Italy was divided into several city-states. Because they were located near the Mediterranean Sea, the Italian city-states served as a natural crossroads between Northern Europe and the lands of the Middle East and Africa. Merchants traveling on land and sea made the Italian peninsula a trading center. For this reason, Italy led medieval Europe in commercial growth. Many Italian city-states became thriving centers of economic activity. In Venice and Genoa, merchants bought and sold Indian spices, Scandinavian furs, Chinese silk, and English wool. Venetian shipyards employed thousands of workers. The growth of trade and commerce in Italy also promoted a free flow of ideas. People began to open their minds to new ways of thinking and doing things. For example, contact through trade gave Italy access to the Muslim world's knowledge of science, math, and classical Greek and Roman scholarship. Supporting the arts. In the Italian city-states, the old aristocrats competed for power and status with wealthy merchants and bankers. The newly rich gained status by becoming patrons of art and learning. A patron is someone who gives money or other support to a person or group. Members of the nobility and the mercantile class used their wealth to support artists and to elevate their own status in society. Some patrons commissioned artists to paint portraits of them wearing jewels from India and their best clothing made from Chinese silk. Other patrons awarded architects commissions for designing grand palaces or public buildings. Once these buildings were completed, painters covered the walls with frescoes and sculptors decorated them with sculpture in marble or stone. Reading check. Why were patrons important during the Renaissance? Florence, Renaissance Center. Shipping through its port made Venice rich and cosmopolitan. Rome was the home of the powerful Catholic Church. However, it was the city of Florence that became the artistic center of the Renaissance. Since ancient Roman times, Florence had been a major stop on trade routes. It was accessible from the Arno River or through passes in the Tuscan Apennines Mountains. In addition to developing as a commerce center, Florence became known for its banking activity. Even the Pope kept his money there. Banking encouraged many other types of businesses, such as silk manufacturing, the wool trade, and silver and gold crafts. Many of these groups established guilds. One of the most powerful banking families in the city was the Medici family. Generations of Medicis were also patrons of the arts. Much of the art and architecture they commissioned was influenced by the grandeur they had seen while visiting aristocratic courts in France. The Medici also built many new churches in Florence and hired artists and sculptors to decorate them. Lorenzo de' Medici, a major Florentine arts patron, understood the value of art to a city. It gave great luster to the state, and this money seems to be well spent. Lorenzo de' Medici. Florentine merchants also spent money on artistic projects. Artists were also sought after by guilds and civic groups. In this way, painters and sculptors worked alongside gold artists or stone carvers on larger projects such as cathedrals. As a result, Florence became a showcase of Renaissance art and architecture. Reading check. How was Florence a center for Renaissance ideas?